Oh my god, Emma, it is 4 a.m. for you? R.I.P. I guess. But hello, chat. How are we all doing today? I'm gonna be honest. I haven't really been up to playing Minecraft on stream for a while. So I've just been resorting to reading fan fiction late at night as kind of like a bedtime story kind of deal. So forgive me for being lazy on that end, but I also really enjoy, I just really enjoy reading because I really immerse myself and like it's cool, and I hope that the viewers enjoy it as well. If I have any new viewers, be sure to leave a follow because at 150 followers I'm gonna be doing an entire stream in a British accent. So that's gonna be fun. But yeah, today I went on Bones and the Bees' AO3 account to see what kind of other stories she's made. And in case you don't know, Bones and the Bees is the author for Tommy and Its Clinic for Supervillains. If you don't know what that is, if you've seen the picture, like the edited pictures of Wilbur Soot with a bandana around his eyes and people going, "Siren! Oh my god!" That's where that character comes from. The author, Bones and the Bees, I read a couple days ago. I read another one of their stories, Under the Brine, and I found another one that is it looks like a cool Crime Boys vampire AU, and I don't know about you, but I love me a good vampire AU, so I wanted to read that. Also, I'm gonna be eating popcorn during the stream. I'm gonna try and keep it as quiet as possible, but if it ever bothers you, let me know. It'll just be evident, like, because I'm not talking. Alright. Let's... Also, I have no idea if my, like, alert actually works. I mean, I should have tested it out before stream, but, like, from what I saw a couple days ago, it only showed, like, the silhouette of my alerts. So hopefully things work out, because I will cry if they don't. Oh my goodness, I open this scene and then everything starts lagging. What a great way to start the stream. Alright, so this story is called Nocturnal Animals. The tags, alternate universe, vampire, modern setting, vampire hunters, suicidal thoughts, implied reference, suicide, blood and injury, violence, Wilbur Soot is not okay, Wilbur Soot needs a hug, vampire Wilbur Soot, vampire hunter Tommy in it, found family. Waterslide Boys! Thank you so much for the raid! Wait, hold up. Is the alert actually working? It is working! Let's go! Thank you so much for the raid, Waterslide Boys! How was your stream? I wasn't able to catch it, I'm sorry, but, what's up? I'm doing well! We're gonna be reading fanfiction today. This sounds cool only because I hear Wilbur Soot. So true, so true. So, for any of my new viewers, oh, was that the host? Was that the host alert, or, wait, what? Oh, Flash Phoenix, thank you so much for the follow. Oh my god, my YouTube mute, like, the music is coming from YouTube and it's lagging. Oh my god. um, Night Glows, Flash, and Flash Phoenix, thank you so much for the follows, you guys. That means we are a couple steps. Oh! Machiavellians. Thank you for the follow as well. That means we're just a few steps closer to, oh my god, I need a proper PC because I have a good stream. Thanks. Sorry. I need a proper PC because streaming on a laptop is not it. I've noticed. Oh my god, the alerts are so laggy. But hey, thank you guys so much for these follows. That means we're a few steps closer to my follower goal. Where I do an entire stream in a British accent. So, Machiavellians. Thank you, Machiavellians. Nodder moment? I think I do have I think I have Nodders as a BTTV emote. Oh god. Yeah, everything's so scuffed. Oh my, I wasn't expecting Tuesday in it. Sorry. Oh, I will do a British accent, oh, hi Mayhem, what's up? I just got raided. This is amazing. As a disclaimer for when I read this, I do accents for each character, so sorry if it's cringe, it helps with my immersion. The mic? What's wrong with the mic? What's wrong with the mic? Listen, I know I have a scuffed mic, okay? I need to get a better one. I know. Anytime I speak above, like, a certain decibel, it, like, makes my voice all weird, like... I have no idea. No, it's fine now? Okay. That's good. I also have popcorn next to me, so, this is gonna be fun. Oh, I want to hear Wilbur's. Oh, when I said that, yeah. I didn't think about that. That's my mistake. Okay. Okay. So, I'm gonna read the tags again. Any trigger warnings? We'll find out in the notes. But I'm gonna read the tags real quick. Alternate universe vampire, modern setting, vampire hunters, suicidal thoughts, implied/referenced suicide, blood and injury, violence, Wilbur Soot is not okay, Wilbur Soot needs a hug, vampire Wilbur Soot, vampire hunter Tommy in it, found family, sometimes you're a vampire hunter and end up with a depressed vampire as your roommate, vampire turning, the tags make it look sad, but I promise this is actually pretty wholesome, Google what do you do when the vampire you're trying to kill is depressed, alternate universe, urban fantasy, fill and techno are only mentioned, angst with a happy ending, brotherly bonding. I'm British? Yeah, I figured you were British, Emma, when you said it was 4 a.m. for you. So, in case you don't know, Nocturnal Animals is written by Bones and the Bees, who has written the very popular, at least on my Twitter timeline, fic, Tommy in its Clinic for Supervillains. Boris Johnson Core. And if that name doesn't ring any bells, it's where the character Siren comes from, where Wilbur is like a villain with like the bandana over his eyes. I saw that on Twitter. Like fan art of it? Is it good? It is so good. If you want to watch me, I don't know if the VODs are still up because I'm not affiliate, but a while ago, like about a month ago, maybe 2 at this point, I read Tommy and its Clinic for Supervillains on stream. I think the first couple, like I think the first few might be gone because it's 26 chapters. But it's okay if you don't want to watch the VODs for it, you can read it for yourself. It is really good. I almost cried. um. Okay. Let's keep going before I lose my audience retention. All right. Summary. Again, Tommy knew he shouldn't care, but he knew he'd never be able to live with himself if he did what Wilbur asked. This guy deserved a chance to live, even if he was undead. His chance at a normal human life had been stolen, and while Tommy couldn't explain why, he felt like he had to make that up to him. Just let me try to find you a blood source that doesn't involve hurting people, Tommy said, squeezing his shoulders. Once we get that worked out, and you don't have to worry about feeding, we can figure out where to go from there. Should I watch the VOD so I can sleep? I mean, you can sleep to the stream while it's live. I'm just saying. Sorry. Is it alright if I listen in the background? Of course. There's no, like, proper way to watch a stream. Especially one where it's just me scrolling through the story and reading it out. The frustration slowly leaked out of Wilbur's face until the only thing left in the lines of his forehead was exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but something more. Something deeper. You're the worst fucking vampire hunter I've ever met. AKA the fic where Tommy's Google search history is probably, what do I do when the vampire I'm trying to kill is depressed as hell and I feel too bad to actually kill him? You have such a nice voice. Oh, thank you. You should hear me sing. Sorry, I got a bit deceited there for a moment. It turns out the answer is make him your roommate and have a found family arc together. Let's see, trigger warnings? Any trigger warnings? Also, please read the tags. This fic is definitely more of a dark humor type of thing. It's not super depressing, but it does deal with dark topics. This chapter especially mentions things like suicidal tendencies, self-harm, and a vampire starving himself, so please stay safe. Yes. Your safety is the most important thing to me, so if there's ever a moment where you feel really uncomfortable hearing about the things that are happening in this story, I won't be mad if you mute the stream or you leave the stream for a few minutes. You should sing Jubilee line in your Will accent. I'll do that at the end of stream. I need to get this done. Chapter 1. This wasn't in the vampire hunting manual. Listening to block men fixes my copium. So true. Magic hummed through Tommy's veins like he was an electric live wire. He could feel the sigils on his arm glowing under his jacket, warming his muscles and keeping him quick as he jumped out of the way of the vampire's swipe. Dried blood tugged against his cheek when he grimaced. The scratch the vampire landed on him having already healed thanks to the magic flowing through him. This wasn't the strongest vampire Tommy had ever fought. Honestly, this wasn't the strongest vampire he'd fought this week. If anything, it was almost sad the way this guy struggled to lunge at him, breathing heavily like even just the slightest movement was hard for him. Tommy sidestepped another attempted hit from the vampire. The silver dagger in his hand hummed with energy, and Tommy flipped it in his palm before darting forward. Also, I may stumble on my words sometimes. Please don't point it out. Just prefacing that right now. The vampire grunted as Tommy pinned him to the wall, wincing when the blade came up to rest against his throat. Tommy waited for him to fight back, for the creature to snap at him with his pointed fangs, to struggle under his grip and shove him backwards. Oh, no worries, I have a stutter. Cool. But instead, as soon as the blade was against his throat, the vampire slumped against the wall completely limp. Tommy didn't let up the pressure he had on the thing's shoulders, but the lack of resistance was enough to make him pause. "Why aren't you fighting back?" Tommy asked, his voice muffled by the black metal mask covering the lower half of his face. The vampire blinked at him slowly, swirling gold eyes quickly fading to dark brown as the adrenaline from the fight faded. "You can kill me," the vampire said in a hoarse voice. "I'm not going to fight it anymore. I'm so tired." Tommy frowned at the vampire. There were dark circles settled under the creature's eyes, and although vampires were already pretty damn pale, this guy looked like his skin was made of paper. Tommy had been a hunter for a few years already, and he knew the tells of a starving vampire. This guy hadn't fed in a while, and it was a miracle he wasn't acting like a feral animal. He should kill the vampire. If he wasn't feral now, he would be soon if he didn't feed. And feral vampires were no fun to deal with. They barely registered things like pain and injuries. They could only think of one thing, and that was blood. But the longer Tommy stared into the dark brown eyes of the weakened vampire, the easier it was to see the resignation in his gaze. He had accepted his death long before Tommy found him in the alley. Death wasn't something he feared. It was something he wanted. Why? Tommy pushed after a few beats of silence. "Why do you want to die?" The vampire let out a weak laugh, but there was nothing joyful about the sound. "Why would I want to live? The only option I have is to hurt innocent people if I don't want to become a fucking animal, and I don't really want to do that anymore. I think getting killed by a hunter is a bit kinder than starving to death." Blinking a few times in shock, Tommy struggled to process the vampire's words. He didn't want to drink from humans? While that wasn't unheard of, it wasn't a common sentiment to come across either, especially not in older vampires. "How old are you?" he asked without thinking. If he had to make a guess, he'd say this guy was under 50 years old. While this could be a trick on the vampire's part, if he was being genuine in his empathy for humans, it meant he was likely very young for a vampire. The vampire hesitated for a moment, eyes flickering over Tommy's face before sighing. "I'm 24. Tommy frowned. "I didn't mean the age you had turned. I meant how old you actually are." "Will is 45. The vampire nodded. "I was 23 when I was turned, and I think it's been a year since then, so I'm 24 now." Oh. Holy shit. Tommy almost dropped the silver dagger pressed against the vampire's throat in his shock. This wasn't just a young vampire. This guy was still technically a fledgling. Although the hunters had limited information on vampire culture and customs, it was rare to see a fledgling out and about without a sire to accompany them, and a vampire was considered a fledgling for the first 3 years after being turned. This guy was clearly alone. If his sire was around, they would have shown up within 2 minutes of Tommy attacking the fledgling. But here he was, pressing a knife to the fledgling's neck, and all Tommy could think about was how human his eyes looked now that they were no longer swirling with shades of gold. It didn't matter if he was young, though. Tommy was supposed to kill all vampires that were found in the city limits. As a hunter, it was Tommy's job to protect innocents. But this guy, he'd been innocent too. Only a year before, he was one of the humans Tommy had been trained to protect. And now he was asking Tommy to kill him. This guy seemed like he hadn't wanted to be turned, which meant Tommy, and the hunters as a whole, had failed at protecting him. The realization hit him like a smack in the face. Tommy couldn't kill him. He couldn't kill this poor bastard who didn't want to live this kind of life in the first place. He was only a few years older than Tommy. If Tommy had met him just a year earlier, they could have been friends. With shaking hands, Tommy pulled the blade away from the vampire's throat and forced himself to take a step back. The vampire slumped against the wall, looking like he was struggling to lift his head as he frowned at Tommy. The hell are you doing? The vampire asked, narrowing his eyes at him. You're a hunter, I'm a vampire. You need to kill me. What was Tommy doing? The vampire was right. Tommy was doing the exact opposite of what he was supposed to. He'd killed plenty of vampires before, so why was this guy any different? Well, he knew the answer to that. Because this guy was so young. Because he wasn't fighting back. Because Tommy couldn't kill someone with eyes as human as his. It feels wrong, Tommy admitted, running his finger along the edge of his blade. I'm guessing you didn't want to be turned? The vampire shook his head. No. I was attacked by a vampire and left to bleed out on the ground. I guess some other vampire came by and took pity on my sorry ass, because I remember a bloody wrist being pressed to my face, and when I woke up, I was alone. But I wasn't human anymore. Tommy clenched his jaw. He was right. The hunters had failed to protect him. I'm sorry. Tommy apologized, and he was surprised at the sincerity dripping from his voice. Sorry I got turned, or sorry you can't even do your job to end this miserable existence I'm trapped in? The vampire asked, his tone turning sharp. Both, Tommy whispered with a wince. Silence fell between them. Tommy stared at the guy, shifting his dagger from hand to hand to try and figure out what the hell he was supposed to do from here. He couldn't just leave the vampire, because it was obvious he didn't want to feed, but if he kept starving himself, he'd end up going feral. He needed a way to get this guy some blood, preferably not straight from a person's neck. Suddenly, a light bulb lit up in Tommy's mind. The hunters had a blood bank. He'd only been down to the storage room twice, but he remembered the way all the same. Plus, if memory served him right, Aaron was going to be the one guarding the door tonight, meaning it wouldn't be all that hard for him to get inside. Come with me, Tommy said to the vampire, sheathing his knife and grabbing the guy's wrist to drag him to the mouth of the alley. The vampire yelped at the touch, despite the fact that Tommy definitely hadn't grabbed him that hard. He yanked his wrist out of Tommy's hand, cradling it to his chest like it had burnt him. Why? Where the hell are we going? The vampire asked, eyes briefly flashing gold again. We're gonna get you some blood, but from an ethical source, Tommy explained, trying to ignore the screaming in his head, telling him he was acting completely insane. Can't have you going feral now, can we? The vampire's irises faded back to brown as his features softened, but there was still wariness etched into the lines of his face. What's the ethical source? Walk with me and I'll tell you, Tommy said, gesturing for him to follow. While the guy still seemed unsure, after a few beats of silence, he sighed and started walking behind Tommy. Can't even get a fucking vampire hunter to kill me, the guy muttered under his breath, shaking his head as Tommy led him out of the alley. Snorting, Tommy glanced over his shoulder as they turned down an empty street. Maybe try not being so pathetic next time. If you put up a bit more of a fight, I probably would have killed you without thinking twice. The guy shot him a dirty look. I'm not pathetic. I'm just tired. Yeah, I can tell, Tommy said, slowing his pace a bit so they were walking side by side. When was the last time you ate anyway, man? The vampire winced at the question, wrapping his arms around himself and looking at the ground. A while. An average full-grown vampire could go roughly a month and a half without drinking the equivalent of an entire human's blood supply before they went feral. Fledglings still had their own human blood lingering in their systems, so they could go nearly 3 months before going feral. This guy seemed right on the edge of the tipping point between feral and not. If Tommy had to take a guess, he'd say it had been at least 2.5 months since the guy had had any blood. downside of fledglings being able to go so long without blood, though, was that starving weakened them far more than it weakened adult vampires. Again, this was obvious with how easy it had been to fight the guy. Tommy didn't say any of that, though, because he could tell by the vampire's face that he didn't want to talk about the last time he fed. So instead, Tommy asked him something else. What's your name? The vampire blinked in surprise. You want to know my name? Yeah? Why else would I have asked the question, dumbass? If vampires could flush, Tommy assumed this guy probably would have. But he couldn't, so instead he just ducked his head like he was embarrassed. Sorry, it's just... I haven't been asked my name for a while. The vampire took a breath to steady himself and looked up again to meet Tommy's eyes. I'm Wilbur. How the fuck did you only get turned a year ago with a name like Wilbur? Tommy asked, chuckling a bit. That's such an old fucking name. If you had told me your name was Wilbur earlier, I would have assumed you were like 500 years old or some shit. I can't believe I'm getting bullied by for my name by a vampire hunter, Wilbur complained. You deserve it with a name like that, Tommy shot back, grinning at the exaggerated pout on the vampire's face. Also, my name is Tommy, which is much cooler than Wilbur for the record. Wilbur rolled his eyes. I think Wilbur is way cooler than Tommy. Tommy is such a basic fucking name. Excuse you, there's nothing basic about Tommy. Careful, danger, cracking in it. There was a pause, and Tommy saw Wilbur was raising an eyebrow at him. There is no way that's your legal name. Is too, bitch! For the first time all night, Wilbur laughed in a way that didn't sound painful. You're fucking with me. No parents would name their kid that. You're right. My parents didn't name me that, Tommy told him with a nod. When I joined the Hunters, I didn't have a birth certificate or anything, so they helped me file all my information. That meant I got to name myself. Suddenly, the small smile that had been growing on Wilbur's face fell. Why didn't you have a birth certificate? Tommy shrugged. That's what happens when you don't know who your parents are, big man. Wilbur's brows furrowed together. How old are you? 17. And how long ago did you join the Hunters? 4 years ago. You were fucking 13 when you joined the Hunters, Wilbur hissed, stopping mid-step. Tommy paused his walking, frowning at Wilbur. Yeah? The Hunters take in recruits as young as 12, but we're not allowed out on patrols until we're at least 16. And then usually we have to be supervised by a senior hunter until we're 18. Wilbur stared at him in blatant shock. Tommy didn't see what the big deal was. It's not like this stuff was a secret. Anyone could access public information like this if they wanted to. It just wasn't advertised on billboards or anything. Why the hell are you alone then if you're 17? Wilbur asked quietly. Because I'm one of the best hunters at the academy, so they made an exception for me, Tommy explained, flashing Wilbur a proud grin. Plus, I'm turning 18 in a few months, so it's not like I'm that far off. Another silence. Wilbur shook his head, as if he was pained by Tommy's words. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then, Wilbur sighed and resumed walking, and Tommy took that as his cue to keep going. I just can't believe the Hunters recruit little children, Wilbur muttered, shaking his head. I'm not a child, Tommy argued, frowning at Wilbur. I don't get why you're acting so shocked. If you knew literally anything about the Hunters, you could have found this out on your own. Well, I've never had much reason to keep up with the Hunters before I got turned. Wilbur admitted, his voice getting softer. And once I was turned, I was more focused on just trying to figure out how to not get killed by you guys. Once again, a pang of sympathy flashed through Tommy. In truth, he didn't mind that Wilbur hadn't known much about the hunters before being turned. That was how it was supposed to be. They were invisible protectors of the city. Innocent people shouldn't have to worry about getting killed by blood-sucking immortals on a daily basis. Oh, bye, Emma. Sleep well. Even if it is just 2 hours. The hunters worked from the shadows, so they didn't have to think about that stuff. Speaking of, all it took was one more turn down an intersection, and the Hunter Academy came into view. A grand old building made of brick and concrete, the academy sat in the heart of the city. It was surrounded on all sides by a spiked iron fence, guarding the green lawn that the hunters trained on. Through the bars, Tommy could see the colorful targets still littered with holes from arrows and knives that had been thrown earlier that day, but there were no people out on the grass. As soon as the academy came into view, Wilbur gasped and stumbled back several steps. Tommy reached out to grab his shoulder, not letting go, even when Wilbur flinched violently at the touch. Why the fuck? Was this some sort of trap? Wilbur asked, betrayal flashing through his eyes. Shit. Yeah, maybe Tommy should have explained on the way over. Wilbur, look, it's not what you think, Tommy reassured, squeezing Wilbur's shoulder. If I wanted to kill you already, I could have, remember? But I didn't, so why the hell would I take you all the way over here if it was a trap? Wilbur was still breathing heavily, but the panic began to fade from his face as he took in Tommy's words. I still don't understand what we're doing here, though. You haven't given me a chance to explain, Tommy pointed out. We have a blood bank here. Blood's been willingly donated by other hunters. I was gonna try and get you a bag of blood to drink. Why the fuck do you have a blood bank? Wilbur asked, narrowing his eyes. 2 reasons. 1, we use it when a hunter has been injured and needs a blood transfusion, Tommy began. And 2, we use it if a hunter gets turned. Now that seemed to shock Wilbur enough that he stopped panicking, instead shifting to confusion. If a hunter got turned, wouldn't you just kill them? Tommy recoiled. What the fuck? No, we're not monsters! Fucking hell, was that really what the public thought about them? Or was it just vampires? If a hunter gets turned, they stay in the organization. They feed on the donated blood and continue their work hunting other vampires. You make vampires hunt other vampires? Wilbur asked. Well, usually they're pretty pissed about being turned, so that's the only thing they want to do, Tommy explained. How many vampires do you have in the hunters right now? At that question, Tommy winced. Well, at the moment we only have 1. He only got turned a few months ago. There was a silent question in Wilbur's eyes, and Tommy decided to answer it before he asked. We've had others, but they, don't usually stick around for very long. They get killed fighting other vampires. Shoving down the bile rising in his throat, Tommy shook his head. It's hard when you become the thing you've sworn to kill. It's really hard for those guys. In his mind, Tommy could see the scene as if it was imprinted on the back of his eyelids. Dark crimson blood pooling on the floor, the sizzling sound of silver embedded in an undead heart. Bright teal hair streaked with red. Wait, bright teal? I'm trying to think of, like, if anybody on the Dream SMP has teal hair, if this is just like an NPC kind of thing. Really, the only person I could think of that's tied to Dream SMP members that has a Minecraft skin with teal hair is Scott. Oh, Skeppy? Maybe. Oh, it's literally right here. It is Skeppy. Tommy could still hear bad screams echoing through the academy's walls. It was Skeppy. I just had to read the next fucking line. I shouldn't laugh either, but it's just really funny. Spec dead. Yep. Understanding dawned on Wilbur's face. They kill themselves. Tommy nodded, squeezing his eyes shut to try and shake the image out of his mind. But, yeah. We have blood banks for that too. So I'm gonna go try and get a bag for you, or two for you. Sensing Tommy's desire to change the subject, Wilbur nodded. Should I come with you, or... No. You don't get anywhere near that building. Tommy cut him off. You just wait here. I'll be back in a few minutes. Yeah. Me too. Although Wilbur didn't seem like he liked the idea of being left alone in front of the academy, he nodded anyway. Okay, just make it quick. Flashing him a reassuring smile, Tommy gave him a thumbs up. I'll be back in 5 minutes. With that, he jogged across the street, ignoring the way his heart was still pounding in his chest. Tommy didn't bother to pull his mask down as he walked up to the front gates of the academy. The two guards on either side recognized him without him needing to show his ID, and he pushed the gates open without any words exchanged between them. His boots slapped against the cobblestone path that led through the lawn and to the building itself. For the thousandth time that night, Tommy questioned what the fuck he was doing. He had returned from patrols like this hundreds of times before, but never with this sickly feeling crawling up his throat. He was about to steal from the hunters, the organization that had clothed him, fed him, and taught him how to defend himself when he was nothing but a starving street rat. The hunters had given him everything, and now he was going behind their backs to help a vampire. But Tommy couldn't kill Wilbur. He couldn't before, and he certainly couldn't now that he'd actually spoken to the guy. So this was his only option. It was a weak excuse, but it was what Tommy was sticking to. Pushing through the grand oak door that made up the front of the academy, Tommy found himself engulfed in shadows. It was late at night, the junior hunters were all asleep, and the senior hunters were either patrolling or their shifts had ended already. Tommy was part of the latter group. His shift had technically ended an hour before, but he'd gotten caught up sparing a vampire with a stupid with a stupid name, which he doubted would count as overtime. Tall archways made of dark wood towered over his head. The plush rug stretched across the floor muffled the sound. The plush rug stretched across the floor muffled the sound of his footsteps, a fact Tommy was grateful for as he hurried towards the door underneath the stairs. The door opened silently. Tommy was careful as he let it click shut behind him, finding himself facing a narrow staircase lit up by the weak glow of a yellow lamp. He hurried down the steps, pausing at the bottom to listen for the sound of voices moving, echoing through the supply room. There was silence. Tommy breathed a sigh of relief and hopped off the last step. Rushing into the supply room, Tommy pulled his silver dagger out of his pocket. Silver daggers were cleaned and repaired at the end of every patrol, with hunters being given secondary daggers to hold onto for self-defense. The metal box covered in sigils and runes that had been scratched into the surface hummed with energy, waiting to log Tommy's return of his dagger. But before he could return it, there was something he had to do if he wanted to get the blood for Wilbur. Undoing his belt and sliding it out from his jeans, Tommy bit the end of the leather before he brought the blade up to his elbow. He had to be careful where he made the cut. It had to look bad, but not actually be that hard to patch up. After checking one more time to make sure no one was coming, Tommy dragged the blade down his forearm, his pain groan muffled by the leather in his mouth. Hot blood immediately began to drip down his skin, pain racing up his arm like living flames. Once he was sure it was big enough, he dropped the dagger and let the blood spill down his arm. The healing sigils on his arms heated up as their magic was activated again, and Tommy winced as he tried to push their power down. He needed to bleed for this. Using his good hand, he opened the box for the daggers and dropped his inside, his ownership sigil glowing soft blue as it was registered by the box itself. With his dagger returned, Tommy dug into his pockets for his roll of bandages. Before he started wrapping his wound, he pressed his arm to his shirt, biting down a yelp when he squeezed the edges to make it bleed more. After a few seconds, he let go, and was satisfied when his shirt was sufficiently covered with blood. Tommy wrapped the wound in gauze and stretchy bandages. Oh, I'm a step away. Okay, that's alright. Keep yourself safe. That's all that matters. If you're still gonna be in chat, I'll send a message in chat when all the stuff talking about this stuff is goes away. Tommy wrapped the wound in gauze and stretchy bandages. The blood stained through the gauze, which was exactly what Tommy needed it to do. As the pain ebbed away, Tommy breathed a sigh of relief, and put his belt back on before doing a once-over of himself in the mirror. He looked pale, with a massive splotch of crimson staining the front of his clothes. The entire lower part of his left arm was also covered in blood, and Tommy wiped it off on his shirt for good measure. Although it would be a bitch to clean, Tommy wasn't unfamiliar with getting blood out of his clothes, so it was probably salvageable. After doing one more check around to make sure he hadn't missed anything, he hurried out of the supply room, slamming the door behind him to announce his presence to anyone around. Turning away from the staircase he'd come from, Tommy hurried down the hall, shoving down the dizziness threatening to make his vision spin. He was fine. He hadn't actually lost that much blood, and would feel better once he ate some dinner. At the end of the hallway, Tommy spotted the door to the blood bank. It didn't look that different from any other door in the building, plain oak wood with a silver doorknob, but the guard sitting in front of the door was what made it stand out. Aaron looked like he was half asleep. He was leaning against the wall, eyes closed and a dark hoodie pulled up to cover his hair like a makeshift pillow. Tommy put a little more force into his footsteps, and Aaron's eyes immediately flew open at the stomping sound that echoed off the walls. As soon as Aaron spotted Tommy, his eyes widened, and he straightened off the wall to rush towards him. "Holy shit, man! What the hell happened to you?" Aaron asked, reaching for Tommy's shoulders as if to steady him. "Something fucking stupid," Tommy mumbled, slurring his words so he sounded more out of it than he was. "Did you get in a fight?" Tommy shook his head. Nah, I was fucking around with my dagger and cut myself, he explained, holding out his bandaged arm for Aaron to see. Aaron blinked in surprise. I wouldn't expect you, of all people, to accidentally cut yourself with your blade. Yeah, that was the tricky part about pulling off this lie. Aaron had joined the academy only a few months after Tommy, and the two had been attached to the hip for most of their junior hunter training. Aaron had been there when Tommy scored perfect marks on his knife throwing tests, so he knew better than anyone that Tommy knew his way around a knife. Hold on a second. It's like not showing up on my screen. One second. Icky part is over. There we go. It was taking the longest time for it to load on my screen. Can you give a summary, not detailed though? Yeah, of course. Basically, I don't know if it was because, like, his dagger needed to be bloody in order for it to be registered to clean, or if he needed to cut himself to get into the blood bank. But I missed plot stuff. Yeah, I think it was really just he had to, like, cut himself to, like, get into the blood bank for a blood transfusion. And right now, Aaron is... It looks like he's being sus of Tommy, like, seeing through his... Like, kind of seeing through his lie that he was just messing around with his knife. Aaron is there? Yeah. But Tommy had been allowed to graduate the juniors program early because of his high marks. Aaron was a bit younger than Tommy, and while he did well in his tests, he wasn't at Tommy's skill level. This meant he was still a junior hunter, and since Tommy had taken up a position as a senior hunter, the two hadn't had much opportunity to spend time together. Thanks? No problem. As much as Tommy missed his friend, at this moment he was insanely grateful he and Aaron hadn't talked for more than 5 minutes in the past 3 months. Because Aaron hadn't seen him train in forever, and was more likely to believe his lie. I know, it was so fucking stupid. There was no one around, so I was bored as shit, and decided to try one of those dumbass tricks I used to do all the time. But then I fucked up and I got a blade in my arm. Tommy groaned, slumping against Aaron's side. Shit, why the hell did you come here instead of going to the infirmary? Aaron asked, grunting under Tommy's weight. If I go to the infirmary, Dream will find out what happened, Tommy explained, shooting Aaron a pleading look, and he might demote me back to a junior hunter. Aaron frowned. You look like you lost a lot of blood. You need a transfusion. Why do you think I came here, dumbass? Tommy asked, raising an eyebrow. Remember when I got stabbed that one time and I was put on bed rest for a whole month? I still have the IV shit in my apartment, and I know my blood type, so I can do it myself. That wasn't necessarily a lie. Tommy did have IV equipment at his apartment that had been left there after he'd recovered from that stab wound. And if it ever came down to it, he knew how to insert an IV line. It was part of the medical training all hunters received in case they ever needed to do emergency field medicine. You want me to let you take a blood bag home with you? Aaron questioned. Yes! You know Ponk always forgets to check out the bags for the infirmary, so if someone asks, you can just say they're the one who took it, Tommy explained, gripping Aaron's forearm. Aaron grimaced. Tommy, I don't know. I can't let Dream find out about this. Please, Aaron. Tommy begged, trying to put as much whine into his voice as he could. I'll owe you one, okay? I really can't get demoted, man. There was a pause as Aaron considered it. Tommy squeezed his arm, begging him with his eyes to give him the bag. After a few seconds, Aaron sighed. Fine, but you're gonna owe me a favor, got it? Oh, thank fuck. Yeah, of course, man. Of course, fuck. I went American! No! The immersion is ruined! Yeah, of course, man. I'll owe you big time for this, Tommy said, grinning at Aaron as he propped Tommy up against the wall. Tommy watched as Aaron pressed his hand against the sigil carved into the wood that locked the door. The sigil glowed gold, matching the identical sigil drawn on top of Aaron's hand, and there was a clicking sound as the door unlocked. Make it quick, Aaron said, letting the door swing open and gesturing for Tommy to go inside. Nodding, Tommy rushed into the room, his arms aching as cold air washed over him. The room was nearly a freezer, and Tommy ignored the way his breath formed small clouds in front of his face as he skimmed the shelves, looking for his blood type. After a few seconds, he spotted the matching bag and grabbed it off the shelf. It was a large pouch filled with bright red liquid, and there was a second where Tommy considered seeing if he could grab two. He quickly dismissed the thought, though. The bag was far too large to hide under his shirt, and Aaron wasn't stupid. He knew Tommy didn't need 2 whole bags of blood. It was fine. This would tie Wilbur over for a while, at least until Tommy could figure out an alternate solution for where he could get blood. In the back of his mind, Tommy wondered why he had so quickly decided that he was going to find a long-term solution for Wilbur. This would keep him from going feral for the time being, and that was Tommy's only real obligation. But it felt wrong to just give him 1 bag of blood and send him on his way. Not when it was clear he was just going to end up in the same place next month. Brushing all that aside for now, Tommy left the blood bank, with Aaron closing the door behind him. Are you gonna be okay getting back to your apartment by yourself? Aaron asked, frowning at him. I'll be fine, Tommy insisted. You know me. I'm such a big, powerful man I could kill a vampire with 1 hand tied behind my back. Aaron rolled his eyes at the boasting. Yeah, I know, the big man is so much better than us average Joes. But if you become a juice pouch for a vamp on your way back, I'm telling everyone at your funeral that your cause of death was failing a knife trick. You're so cruel, Aaron. You're supposed to make me sound like I was the coolest man ever at my funeral. I'm not a liar, though, Aaron said innocently, and Tommy gasped. You are such a bitch! A bitch who's letting you steal blood, Aaron snorted. Hurry up and get the hell out of here before someone sees you. Flashing Aaron a grateful smile, Tommy turned away to head down the hall. Thanks, man. Aaron waved at him as he left, and Tommy nearly collapsed in relief as soon as he was out of Aaron's line of sight. Fuck. That worked even better than he thought it would. If anyone but Aaron had been working that night, Tommy probably wouldn't have gotten away with it. But Aaron had helped him out of a sticky situation like this before. He was the friend that Tommy could call to hide a body, and Aaron would help him with no questions asked, though he'd probably make Tommy buy him dinner afterwards as a thank you. Thankfully, Tommy didn't run into anyone as he left the academy building. Instead of going back through the front gate to leave, he went to the much smaller back gate. It was one that was enchanted, so you could only exit it and not enter it, so there was no need for a guard to stand watch. Tugging off his mask and shoving it in his pocket, he sighed as the cool night air hit his flushed cheeks. Then he pulled his jacket back on, wincing when the sleeve rubbed against his bandages. He hated lying to Aaron, but it wasn't like he had much other choice. At the very least, the bile in his throat had subsided, and he could breathe easy again as he rushed back across the street with the blood bag in hand. Wilbur was still waiting on the corner where Tommy had left him. He had his arms folded over his chest and was hunched in on himself, as if he was trying to make himself smaller. The minute Tommy got close, though, his head whipped up. "What the hell took you so long? I swear to God you were in there for—" Wilbur cut off as a breeze blew from behind Tommy, ruffling his hair and sending the smell of Tommy's blood straight into Wilbur's face. His eyes immediately began to glow gold, and Tommy cursed himself for not thinking about the fact that he was walking up to a starving fledgling covered in his own blood. Wilbur pressed a hand over his mouth, stumbling back a few steps as his glowing eyes flickered over Tommy's left arm and the blood bag in his hand. What the fuck happened?" His voice was muffled by the fingers pressed against his mouth. "Did you get in a fight?" Although Tommy had already accepted he couldn't kill Wilbur, his good hand drifted to the secondary dagger he had stashed in his pocket. "No, I had to come up with an excuse for why I needed a bag of blood, so I cut my arm." "What the fuck is wrong with you?" Wilbur exclaimed, still keeping his hand over his mouth. "Why the hell would you hurt yourself for me?" It was the only thing I could think of on such short notice. But that's besides the point right now, because I need to know if you can make it back to my apartment without trying to rip my throat out or not," Tommy snapped, wrapping his hand around the hilt of the smaller dagger. Wilbur flinched at the question. "I'll be fine. I just won't breathe." With that, Wilbur dropped his hand from his mouth. Although his eyes stayed gold and he didn't move closer to Tommy, Tommy's eyes fell to his chest and noticed there was no rise and fall to it. "Why were you breathing before? It's not like you need to," Tommy said, remembering the lessons the Academy had given them on how trying to suffocate or choke a vampire wasn't going to get them anywhere. Wilbur shrugged, wrapping his arms around himself. "It's a habit. Way harder to break than you'd think it'd be." He spared one last glance at the blood bag in Tommy's good hand before he looked back to the street. "So, which way are we going?" "This way," Tommy told him, starting in a direction and trusting Wilbur would follow him. They headed down the road, with Tommy doing his best to ignore the way his head was spinning the longer they walked. Maybe he had made himself bleed just a bit too much, but as long as he didn't pass out during this walk, he would be fine. He just had to make it back to his apartment. Then he could eat a chocolate bar and the dizziness would go away. Thankfully, there was no one else out on the streets at this hour, because Tommy wouldn't have wanted to try and explain why he was walking down the street with a blood bag if they ran into anyone. The chilly night air threaded under his jacket, making goosebumps rise on his skin. He shivered, and Wilbur gave him a worried look, but didn't say anything as they turned down another corner. Finally, when Tommy was debating if he should sit down for a few minutes to catch his breath, he spotted his apartment building in the distance. The relief revitalized him enough to quicken his pace, and Wilbur picked up his own speed to match him as they hurried to the building. The apartment complex wasn't anything fancy, but it was far better than the dilapidated buildings on the edge of the city. As a junior hunter, Tommy had lived in the dorms of the academy. Since he'd been promoted to senior hunter, though, he'd gotten his own apartment paid for by the academy, which was one of the best perks of being a senior hunter in his humble opinion. Tommy had never had his own place to live until now. He'd always either been on the streets, couch surfing, or staying in the dorms with dozens of other hunters. His apartment was small, and maybe the sink had a leaky faucet that he couldn't seem to fix no matter how many times he got Sam to try and fix it for him. But it was home, and Tommy wouldn't trade it for anything else. Wilbur stayed close to his side as they walked through the front doors of the building, head down while he followed Tommy to the elevator. For their first few steps across the foyer, Tommy was relieved because he didn't see anybody else around, and he really didn't want to have to explain why he was holding a giant bag of blood with a strange dude walking next to him. But then, Tommy's luck of the night seemed to run out, because the elevator opened with a loud ding right when Tommy was about to press the button to call it. Tommy found himself making eye contact with a pair of flat purple eyes that he was all too familiar with. Purple was Tommy's neighbor a few doors down, and the two had chatted casually a few times when they'd caught the elevator together, but had never talked enough to be considered anything more than acquaintances. Right stiffened as Purple glanced him up and down, eyes lingering on the blood bag he totally couldn't hide. He waited for Purple to look surprised, worried, or even just plain confused. Instead, though, Purple just blinked, his expression completely flat. "Do I want to know why you have that?" Purple asked, holding the elevator door open with his arm. Wilbur shrunk in on himself, while Tommy shook his head. "Nope, you don't." Purple glanced between Tommy and Wilbur for a beat, before shrugging and stepping out of the elevator. "Okay. See you later, man." "Later," Tommy called, breathing out a sigh of relief. "My golden boys crumbs!" You must be excited for your MCC next Saturday then, huh? And Wilbur took Purple's place in the elevator. Hold on, I want to eat some of my popcorn real quick. What do you mean what happened in MCC? Tommy and Purple are on a team. I think. I'm fairly certain they are. 1 second. MCC. Yeah, Pink Parrots, Purple, Tommy, Captain Sparkles, and the Orion Sound. Hydrate or die straight, so true. Although, this is popcorn, not water. But I will be drinking water after I eat some popcorn. I've never heard that before. Hydrate or die straight. I'm using that. I'm so excited for MCC Golden Boys. It's literally one of my main subtwits. That's cool. I watch Purple on a very rare occasion, but he's cool. I wonder why they're called Golden Boys. Is it because they're blonde? Is it because they're blonde? I swear to God, if it's because they're blonde. Same as Bed Wars streams are great. Yep, that's literally it. Cool. Let's see. Purple was the kind of guy who didn't mess in business that wasn't his to mess with. Tommy respected that about him, and it was very helpful for his current situation. As the elevator doors closed and Tommy hit the button for his floor, Wilbur glanced up. "Friend of yours?" he whispered. Tommy shook his head. "Just a neighbor." Wilbur nodded and dropped his eyes again. Tommy was still swaying as he stood, and he had to close his eyes when the light of the elevator was a bit too bright for his pounding head. He must have leaned a bit too far to the right, because there was a cold hand on his shoulder, and he jumped when he saw Wilbur was holding on to him to steady him. Neither of them spoke. As soon as the elevator doors opened, Wilbur dropped his hand, and Tommy stumbled out with the blood bag pressed to his chest. His hand shook as he unlocked the door to his apartment. Once he stepped inside, though, he heaved a sigh of relief as he shoved the blood bag into Wilbur's arms, stumbling forward to collapse face first onto his couch. Thank fucking God, Tommy muttered, the red fabric of the cushion scratching his cheek. I'm so goddamn tired. Are you okay? Wilbur asked while hovering in front of the couch, holding the blood bag with the same kind of caution someone would hold a gun with. I had to cut open my arm and bleed all over myself to get that blood bag for you. What do you think? Tommy deadpanned, his voice muffled by the couch. You better fucking enjoy it. Wilbur glanced at the blood bag again, his eyes flashing gold the longer he stared at it. Tommy was surprised he hadn't ripped the thing open the second they stepped inside of the apartment, especially if he'd been holding his breath so he didn't have to smell Tommy's blood. Still, he hadn't started drinking the blood yet, and instead kept glancing between it and Tommy like he was waiting for permission. Will, my man, what's the holdup? Tommy asked, readjusting his head so his face was no longer squished into the pillow. Brows furrowing, Wilbur shrugged. I feel guilty drinking this when you're, not doing well. Huffing, Tommy rolled his eyes. If you're that worried, go get me a chocolate bar from the kitchen. That'll help me feel better. Or, that'll help me feel better. Although Wilbur still seemed unsure, he hurried towards the kitchen, the harsh fluorescence buzzing when he flipped them on. Forcing himself to sit up against the couch, Tommy squeezed his eyes shut again when the movement made the room spin, and waited until he heard Wilbur's footsteps coming back over him to open them. Wilbur was holding a chocolate bar in front of his face, along with a bottle of water he didn't even realize he had in his cabinet. Muttering a thanks, Tommy took the chocolate and the bottle from the vampire, and tore the chocolate bar open before taking the largest bite he could out of it. The sweetness exploded across his tongue, and Tommy sighed in relief as he slumped back against the cushions. He swallowed his mouthful and glanced back up at Wilbur, who was still standing in front of the couch like he wasn't sure what to do now. I've got my chocolate. I'm good, Tommy told him, holding up the candy. It's your turn. Okay, Wilbur muttered, frowning at the blood bag. Should I drink it over the sink in case I spill, or what kind of fucking vampire are you? I don't care, just drink the fucking blood so I don't have to look at it anymore. If vampires could flush with embarrassment, Tommy was sure Wilbur would be doing exactly that. He winced and hurried to the kitchen, making Tommy roll his eyes as he took another bite of his candy. It was almost funny to watch Wilbur try to figure out the best way to drink the blood. First, he stared at it for a solid 10 seconds, his eyes flickering over it like he was looking for a place to poke a straw into it. Then, he started fiddling with the corner of the plastic, like he was debating tearing it open from the bottom and slurping it. If anything, it was a bit pathetic. You know I have cups, Tommy said after a solid 30 seconds of watching Wilbur struggle with the blood bag. Wilbur blinked. Is it okay to use your cups for this? Would I have suggested it if I wasn't fine with it? Tommy scoffed. Fair enough, Wilbur muttered. He opened the cabinet and took out a tall glass, setting it down before tearing open the corner of the blood bag. Tommy watched as thick red blood filled up the glass, and noticed that Wilbur's eyes had started twirling with gold once more. If Wilbur had grabbed a glass he couldn't see through, it would almost look like he was drinking soda or something. Tommy had seen vampires feed before. It was an animalistic affair of bared fangs and bloody throats. But Wilbur leaned against the counter like he was just a normal guy, sipping at his blood in exactly the same way Tommy sipped at his Coca-Cola. Except there were a few subtle differences. Of course, there were the gold eyes, but there was also the way Tommy could see the tension leaking out of Wilbur's shoulders with every gulp. He slumped against the counter, his eyes fluttering shut like he was a man in a desert who'd just gotten his first sip of water in days. Maybe it was weird for Tommy to watch Wilbur drink blood, but it wasn't like he got the opportunity to just watch a vampire drink without the whole, trying to kill them part. Once Wilbur had finished the glass, he poured the rest of the blood from the bag to refill it, and repeated the process to finish it off. Once he was done, he set the cup down and dragged his hands down his face, letting out a sigh of relief. When he opened his eyes again, they had gone back to dark brown, and Tommy could already see the dark circles fading away. "Feeling better?" Tommy asked, taking a sip from his water bottle. Wilbur nodded. "Yeah, fuck, man. I didn't realize how bad off I was until now." Tommy had noticed. Despite Wilbur's surprising amount of self-control, he probably had only been a few days away from going feral. Now, though, he should have been good for at least a week or two. That didn't mean all his problems were solved, though. Wilbur was still a vampire with the potential to go feral. If Tommy wasn't going to kill him, he better damn well make sure he wasn't going to hurt anyone. As Tommy tried to think over options in his head, because God knew he wasn't going to be able to pull the trick he'd done tonight a second time, Wilbur stiffened and took a step towards the door. "I should be heading out now, I think," Wilbur said, eyes darting between Tommy and the door. Immediately, Tommy frowned. "What? No, you're not leaving yet." Pausing mid-step, Wilbur blinked at Tommy. Look, I appreciate the help, but you've done quite a lot for me already. I don't want to overstay my welcome." "You're not overstaying your welcome," Tommy said, standing up so he could properly look Wilbur in the eyes. "In case you forgot, I'm a hunter. I need to know where you plan on getting your blood from now on." Wilbur froze. "I mean, you don't really want to hear that I'll hunt, do you?" Tommy huffed. "I don't believe you're going to hunt. I don't believe you're going to hunt," he corrected, raising an eyebrow at him. "You've been starving yourself for ages now. I really doubt you're just gonna go hunting people again like any normal-ass vampire." There was a beat of silence as Wilbur stared at him. When it became clear he wasn't going to say anything, Tommy continued. "You aren't planning on hunting, are you?" Tommy then asked, his voice softer now. A choking silence smothered the air between them. A silence that spoke louder than any words could. "Look, man, I can't let you starve yourself. You'll go feral at some point and probably hurt a lot of innocent people," Tommy pointed out, frowning at him. Wilbur squeezed his eyes shut, letting out a slow breath between his teeth. "I wasn't planning on starving myself," he said quietly. "Then what were you planning to do?" Opening his eyes again, Wilbur glared at him. Tommy met his gaze without flinching, because he wasn't an idiot. He could read between the lines well enough to see what Wilbur's intentions actually were. "I told you I was tired," Wilbur told him, his voice so low, Tommy almost couldn't hear it. "And there were other hunters in the city besides you." God damn it. If Wilbur had at least tried to lie, this wouldn't be Tommy's problem. But now there was a suicidal vampire standing in front of him who had been a human only a year before. While the Academy would say the only solution for this problem was the dagger still sitting in his pocket, Tommy had already made peace with the fact that he couldn't kill Wilbur. It wasn't right. I'm not letting you go out and get yourself killed. Especially not after I just fucking cut my arm open for you, asshole. Tommy snapped, pointing at the lump of a bandage underneath his jacket sleeve. I didn't ask you to do that. Wilbur snapped back. If you just killed me in that alleyway, none of this would have happened. Yeah, well, I hate to break it to you, but I actually have a thing called compassion, so that's why I did that. You shouldn't have any goddamn compassion for me, Wilbur hissed, storming forward so he was right in Tommy's face. I'm a vampire, the thing you're supposed to kill. Tommy didn't flinch when Wilbur got up in his face. Instead, he just folded his arms over his chest and met Wilbur's eyes evenly. The hunters were supposed to protect you, and we didn't, Tommy said calmly. I can't undo that, and it sucks shit. But I can try to make up for our failure. Wilbur stared at him for a moment, his painfully human eyes filled with a deep kind of sorrow that hurt Tommy just to look at. He took a shaky breath, and suddenly, he was tipping forward and clutching the front of Tommy's shirt. Please, Wilbur whispered, head brushing Tommy's chest. If you want to help me, just fucking put me out of my misery. I don't even have a future anymore. So what's the point in going on with this? Placing his hands on Wilbur's shoulders, Tommy pushed him away from his chest, but held him so they were back to being face to face. I don't know what the fuck you're on about, but you're literally immortal now. All you have is future. Wilbur scoffed, like Tommy had told some kind of bad joke. For the past year, I've had to live on the streets, hiding from hunters and trying not to kill people when I drink from them. I lost my friends. I didn't have any family, and even if I did, I'd outlive all of them. Why the hell would I look forward to an eternity of that? Shit. This guy was really in the gutter about everything, wasn't he? Again, Tommy knew he shouldn't care, but he knew he'd never be able to live with himself if he did what Wilbur asked. This guy deserved a chance to live, even if he was undead. His chance at a normal human life had been stolen, and while Tommy couldn't explain why, he felt like he had to make that up to him. Just let me try to find you a blood source that doesn't involve hurting people, Tommy said, squeezing his shoulders. Once you get that worked out and you don't have to worry about feeding, we can figure out where to go from here. The frustration slowly leaked out of Wilbur's face, until the only thing left in the lines of his forehead was exhaustion. Not physical exhaustion, but something more. Something deeper. You're the worst fucking vampire hunter I've ever met. Tommy gasped in fake offense. Excuse you? I have some of the top scores at the academy. And yet you won't even kill the vampire literally begging you to stab him. Wilbur deadpanned, raising an eyebrow. You're really failing at your only job here. Oh, fuck off, Tommy scoffed, shoving Wilbur back and dropping his hands from his shoulders. You gonna let me find you an ethical blood source before trying to go get killed by a hunter or what? You're not really giving me much of a choice here, Wilbur huffed, plopping down on the couch with his arms wrapped around himself. You're right, I'm not. Bending down, Tommy picked up a blanket off of a chair he had shoved in the corner of the living room and tossed it at Wilbur's face. Wilbur yelped as he caught it, and Tommy ignored his glare as he set the blanket down on the couch beside him. What's this for? Wilbur asked. You said you live on the streets, right? Wilbur nodded. Well, that's not gonna work if I need to stay in contact with you about finding you an ethical blood source, so you can stay here till I work that out. Wilbur frowned again, although there was no real anger behind it. He opened his mouth to say something, paused, before glancing at the blanket in his lap. He was silent for a moment as he picked up the threads on the corner of the blanket. I don't understand you at all, Wilbur muttered, shaking his head. Tommy wished he could give Wilbur a logical explanation for what the hell he was doing, but frankly, he didn't understand it either. All he could do was just go along with what his gut was telling him to do, because his gut had never steered him wrong before. He decided to ignore Wilbur's comment and headed to the door that led to his bedroom. I'm tired as hell, so I'm gonna go to sleep. Don't go through my shit, but you're welcome to read anything on that bookshelf, Tommy said, gesturing to the bookshelf that sat against the wall across from the couch. You know I could kill you in your sleep, Wilbur pointed out. Tommy snorted. Yeah, sure. Even if you even tried that, which I seriously doubt you would, I sleep with a knife under my pillow, so I'm not that worried, bud. Wilbur's face fell, and Tommy flipped him off before turning into his room, slamming the door shut behind him. Even though he wasn't worried about Wilbur attacking him in his sleep, he locked the door to the room anyway, just in case. And then, for the first time in hours, he was finally alone. Slumping against his door, Tommy let out a quiet breath between his teeth. He had no idea what the hell he was doing. Nothing about his actions tonight made any damn sense, but it was like Tommy had lost all self-control. He couldn't kill Wilbur. He couldn't let Wilbur get killed by another hunter. He had lied to his friend to steal blood for a vampire he'd just fucking met that night. It was insane. Tommy was well aware of that. But if there was one thing Tommy knew about himself, it was that he was stubborn. Once he made a decision, he wasn't one to go back on it. And he had decided back in that alleyway that he wasn't going to hurt Wilbur. Collapsing face first onto his bed, Tommy groaned into his pillow as he debated Googling what to do if you find yourself stuck with a suicidal vampire. But he was too tired to bother grabbing his phone from his pocket, the blood loss still sending his vision spinning when he stood for too long. He would be fine in the morning, but for now, all he wanted to do was pass out. Maybe it should have been harder to fall asleep when he knew there was a literal vampire sitting right outside his door, but to Tommy's surprise, it was only a few minutes before he was out like a light. Oh, next chapter we'll switch to Wilbur's POV. How many chapters are there? It doesn't tell you at the bottom of the page how many chapters there are. So, wait, entire work. Oh, shoot, wait, no. Not entire work. Not entire work. Not entire work, no! Chapter by chapter. Back to chapter by chapter. That's not what I meant to do. No! Oh, wait, did it say? How do you know? Did it say? Wait, it says 6 of 9. Where did it say 6 of 9? And why would it say 6 of 9? Or, oh, at the end it said this thing is gonna be 6 to 9 chapters? God damn, I am unobservant. Wait, it doesn't say... Oh wait, look under stats. Oh, because 6 of the 9 chapters are written. Oh, wait, under stats? Wait, stats are at the top under tags. Oh! Oh, okay, that... There's still some things I need to learn about AO3. Okay, here's the thing. How long is the next chapter? I'm not new to... Okay, I've read a majority of the things that I read on stream come from AO3, but there's still some things I don't know about it. Okay, wait. I hope I'm not spoiling you right now. I just need to know how long this chapter is. It doesn't seem to be as long as the previous one. Screw it, let's read one more. And then I promise I haven't forgotten about the singing Jubilee line in Wilbur Soot accent. All right. Chapter 2. Maid Service. Summary. Wilbur is left alone for the day while Tommy is at work. Trigger warnings for this chapter, more minor mention of suicidal thoughts, also descriptions of an unclean apartment, nothing extreme but old food is mentioned. I didn't think about how that could be a trigger warning, but I guess it could be a trigger warning for, like, depression or something. I don't even know if that's, like, a thing you should trigger warning for, but I overthink all the time, so I get it. Contrary to popular belief, vampires do in fact need to sleep. But they don't need to sleep nearly as often as humans do. For the most part, a healthy vampire can sleep for an hour or two once a week and be perfectly functional. Keyword being healthy. Wilbur couldn't remember the last time he slept for more than 20 minutes at a time. He had been hiding out in damp alleyways for months now, and any time he tried to fall asleep, he would either be woken by the smell of all the humans walking right on by outside the alley, or he would hear footsteps getting just a tad too close for comfort, and fear would jerk him awake with a violent start. He was exhausted, in so many different ways, but especially in the physical sense. So when Tommy tossed him a blanket and left him alone to sleep on the couch, even though Wilbur entertained the idea of leaving while the kid was asleep, he found he was too exhausted to even think about getting up from the couch. When he woke up, there was a brief second where Wilbur didn't remember much of anything. In that hazy place between sleep and waking, Wilbur could only feel a warm blanket thrown over him and soft couch cushions cradling his body. There was no icy wind, no rancid water pooling under his head, no hard concrete making every single joint in his body ache. For the briefest of moments, Wilbur forgot he wasn't human anymore. He was himself again. Just for one blissful, perfect second. And then it all came flooding back. Eyes flying open, Wilbur ignored the ache in his chest as he sat up on the couch and looked around. Curtains had been pulled over the windows, but Wilbur could still feel fading sunlight trying to push its way through the dark fabric. When he glanced towards Tommy's bedroom, he saw the door was cracked open, but couldn't hear the soft in and out of Tommy's breathing. It was then he noticed a piece of paper settled on top of the coffee table that hadn't been there when he'd fallen asleep. Reaching out, Wilbur picked it up and blinked a few times to clear his vision so he could read it. By the way, anything that is in writing form I don't use accents for, fuck you. Sorry. Will bitch, my shift starts at 6 and since it's 5:30 and you're still fucking sleeping, you're probably gonna wake up after I'm gone. I'll be back around 2 or 3 a.m., but don't be a bitch and go anywhere till I'm back. I'm gonna ask around and see if I can find anything about a place to get you blood. Don't touch my shit. Wait, did he sleep through the entire fucking day? Wilbur huffed at the note. If his shift started at 6 and he was already gone, that meant Wilbur must have slept through the entire day. Checking the clock on the wall only confirmed that. It was 6:30 in the evening, meaning Wilbur had been passed out for over 14 hours. Fucking hell. It really had been a while since he'd slept, huh? Sleep clung to him like a second skin. He suppressed a yawn, dragging a hand down his face before stretching his arms above his head. Despite the grogginess, his head felt clearer than it had in weeks, and his limbs weren't weighed down by fatigue. Damn. He had almost forgotten what it felt like to not be hungry all the time. It was still there. The thirst was always there, making the back of his throat twinge and nag him for more and more, far more than he could ever let himself have. But for the first time in ages, it didn't feel like his throat was on fire. It made a world of difference. He wouldn't say he felt human again. Wilbur knew he wasn't ever going to feel truly like himself again. His eyesight was too sharp, hearing too sensitive. Even now, just sitting in Tommy's apartment, he could hear the rhythmic footsteps of people walking down the street outside, or the rumbling of cars passing by in a way that was grating on his ears. I remember when I was younger, I kind of entertained the idea that I was secretly a vampire, because not necessarily because of like, actually, yeah, no, one of the things was heightened hearing in some ways because I'm autistic, and one of the things about being autistic or ADHD, or I can't remember which one it is being able to hear just like the most insignificant things around you. And I also liked the taste of blood, and I thought that having sharp teeth near the back of your jaw weren't normal. So I kind of entertained the idea that I was a vampire for a little bit when I was 9 years old. I used to be really good at, I would guess song lyrics never knowing the song. I could kind of do that too, especially if I picked up on the rhyming scheme. I would do that too. I remember doing that once and feeling so proud of myself that I knew what was going to happen next, because I predicted the rhyming scheme. I would also do that with predicting the next note that someone would sing, because I'm also really good at picking up on chord progression and notes that kind of fit into it here and there. Probably coincidences, but it used to happen all the time. Yeah, same with me. One second, drink break. I would sing harmonies and crap. Yeah, I do that too. But sometimes I'm not good at doing the harmony because I've kind of lost my... I've kind of lost it a little bit growing up, even though I've been studying music. At least it was somewhat more peaceful without Tommy here. If Wilbur hadn't been so exhausted, it probably would have taken him much longer to fall asleep with the constant thump 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 of Tommy's heartbeat pounding in his ears in the next room over. Of course, there was still the constant dripping of the leaky faucet coming from the kitchen, but there wasn't much Wilbur could do about that. With a loud groan, Wilbur pushed to his feet. He wandered over to the kitchen sink, splashing his face with cool water and rubbing the sleep from his eyes, despite the fact that he didn't get crusty eyes from sleeping anymore. One of the many ways vampire physiology was more efficient, he supposed. In some ways, though, it was small stuff like that that bugged him the most. Tiny reminders that Wilbur Soot was dead, and he was just the man's corpse shuffling around. I can't sleep, your heartbeat is too loud. Once he had woken up a bit more, Wilbur debated if he should leave Tommy's apartment while he was gone. He knew Tommy wouldn't be back anytime soon, so it's not like he'd be able to stop Wilbur like before. It was what he should do. Tommy didn't need to be wasting his time trying to take care of him. The kid was too compassionate for his own good, it seemed. It would make both their lives easier if Wilbur just snuck out now and tried to attack the first hunter he saw. That would end things nice and quickly. But it was one thing to say he was ready to die when his thirst was burning a hole through his throat. He hadn't slept in weeks, and he was being pinned to the wall by a hunter far stronger than he was. It was a whole other thing to consider the same fate when he was fed and well rested for the first time in ages. Besides, it wouldn't be fair to Tommy if he left and got himself killed today. Tommy had cut his arm open to steal that blood bag for him, so Wilbur had to repay the favor somehow. Get him McDonald's. Sorry, wrong AU. Once he made that up to Tommy, then he could go on his merry way. He didn't want to be visiting the afterlife with karmic debt after all. Yeah, that was a good plan. Try to find a way to repay the favor to Tommy and then get out of his hair before he did more excruciatingly kind things to Wilbur. Checking the time again, Wilbur groaned when he saw it was only 6:45. He had quite a while to wait before Tommy came back. Glancing around the apartment, Wilbur noticed the place was a bit untidy. Fourth wall she. Dirty dishes were piled high in the sink. The counters looked as though they were in desperate need of dusting, and Wilbur was certain Tommy hadn't vacuumed in at least 3 months. Unsurprising, given a 17-year-old boy was living by himself, and teenage boys were usually pretty disgusting. Although, to give Tommy credit, the apartment was nowhere near as bad as it could have been. Well, if he wanted to work on repaying the favor, cleaning up Tommy's apartment seemed like a good place to start. Letting out a heaving sigh, Wilbur opened the closet doors to find an ancient vacuum nestled in the far back corner, and got to work. Wilbur spent the next several hours cleaning Tommy's apartment for lack of anything better to do. He vacuumed, wiped down all the counters and disinfected them, washed all the dishes and put them away, and even cleaned out Tommy's fridge because there was a rotten smell coming from inside it that made him gag every time he stepped foot inside the kitchen. The culprit was a styrofoam takeout box of chow mein that had to be at least 2 months old. Fucking hell, Tommy. After the living room and kitchen were spotless, Wilbur went into Tommy's room because he could smell old food stuck onto dishes, and found several dirty plates and a few empty cups that had probably once been filled with soda. After he cleaned those and put them in the sink to dry, he headed back into the bedroom to do another sweep and make sure there was nothing else extremely pressing that he needed to clean. Tommy's room was surprisingly empty, at least in terms of decorations. The walls were plain white, there was a single dresser in the corner, and the only pop of color in the room was a red blanket tossed over a gray comforter. However, Wilbur did notice one personal touch from Tommy in the room. There was a window on the left side of his bed that looked out onto a city street below, and on the white windowsill, Wilbur noticed a few small plants straining for the little sunlight the window gave them. While Wilbur didn't know much about plants, he could tell by their bright green leaves and the way a few were spilling out of their tiny pots that Tommy was taking good care of them. He checked the soil and noticed it was damp, so he figured he shouldn't water them. It was almost endearing to see that Tommy, despite his loud mouth and aggressive attitude, liked plants enough to keep several next to his bed. He didn't seem like the gardener type, but then again, he was also a vampire hunter who was going above and beyond to help Wilbur, a vampire, so Wilbur really shouldn't be expecting anything with Tommy because he was completely unpredictable. As he prepared to leave Tommy's room, Wilbur then saw light glinting off something metal in the closet. Even though Tommy told Wilbur not to go through his stuff, well, The closet door was left open, so it's not like he was purposefully snooping. Pushing open the door just a bit more, Wilbur froze when he realized he was staring at one of the metal poles the hospital's hung IV bags from. There were also some unused IV bags laying on the ground, shoved in the far corner of the closet and coated with dust. Looking closer, Wilbur also noticed a cardboard box stuffed with things like bandages, antiseptic ointment, and syringes to start IV lines with. What the fuck? Wilbur muttered. Why the hell would Tommy have so much medical stuff in his closet? You'd think being a hunter came with health insurance, but maybe it didn't. It was then Wilbur took a deep breath through his nose out of habit, and that was a mistake. Immediately, Wilbur was slapped in the face with the overwhelming scent of blood. It was old blood, the sweetness that usually came with the scent having turned to something closer to rotten fruit, but it was definitely blood all the same. Wilbur should have walked out of the closet and shut the door behind him right then and there, but he didn't. Instead, he sniffed again, wondering where the hell the blood smell was coming from. It wasn't hard to find. There was a laundry basket shoved in the corner of the closet, with the shirt Tommy had been wearing the night before thrown over the top. But the blood smell was too strong to just be coming from that, and when Wilbur lifted the top shirt off, his eyes widened as he realized every single piece of clothing in the basket had blood staining it. Shirts, pants, jackets. There was at least one drop of blood on all of it. Some of the stains were clearly months or even years old, the scent heavily dulled by what Wilbur guessed had been dozens of wash cycles that weren't enough to get rid of the stains completely. But some were fresher, and while the majority of it smelled like Tommy's blood, some of it definitely wasn't. Did Tommy really get hurt this often? Wilbur supposed that made sense if he was patrolling every single night, but he knew just by looking at these clothes that Tommy had to be covered in scars. Wilbur had only seen him with his jacket on the night before, covering everything from his neck to his wrists. He was a little scared to see what Tommy's arms looked like without anything to cover them. Surprisingly, the scent of blood didn't worsen his thirst. If anything, it repelled him from wanting blood, because he was so disgusted at realizing how many times this teenager must have been hurt. Forcing himself back into the living room, Wilbur abandoned all thoughts of cleaning as he paced back and forth, going over everything he knew about the hunters. According to Tommy, a hunter couldn't patrol alone until they were 18, but they had made an exception for Tommy. He had been with the hunters since he was 13, because apparently they recruited literal children to fight immortals. It was disturbing that the hunters were able to recruit children openly and no one blinked twice at it. If Tommy had joined the hunters at 13, that also begged the question of why. It didn't seem like Tommy held a grudge against vampires considering how willing he was to help Wilbur. So why would a 13-year-old decide to become a vampire hunter? When put together with the fact that Tommy had also mentioned not having any parents, it painted a troubling picture for how the hunters got so many children into their ranks. Of course, this was just Wilbur speculating. He'd have to ask Tommy directly why he joined the hunters before he could come to any conclusion like that. Still, the possibility unnerved him more than he'd like to admit. With most of the apartment cleaned up, Wilbur found himself at a loss for what to do next. He ended up taking Tommy's offer of having free range of the bookshelf and skimmed over to see what kind of books Tommy kept in his place. Let's see, Wilbur muttered under his breath, fingers brushing along the spines. Book on how to kill vampires, book on making weapons to kill vampires, book on vampire physiology, gardening tips, book on the history of vampire hunting. Tommy had a lot of books on vampires, and most of them seemed completely untouched. Had Tommy bought all of these himself? Or maybe someone from the academy had gifted them to him. Wilbur wasn't really sure. Either way, though, he wasn't very interested in reading any of those texts. Right when Wilbur was about to give up, though, his eyes caught on one title he'd missed during his first skim. Potions, a beginner's guide. Huh. While Wilbur had always been interested in things like sigils, runes, and potion making, he'd never found much time or opportunity to learn about any of them. He'd always been too focused on other things, like saving his money to buy a new guitar, or trying to advertise his skills as a music teacher despite being self-taught. He'd never worried about it too much, always assuming he'd get around to learning about those things at some point in the future. Drink break. It was a bit ironic, but here he was now, with more future laid out in front of him than he really wanted to think about. There was a book on potion making only inches from his hands, and he still had a few hours before Tommy would get back. Taking the potion book off the shelf, Wilbur settled back down on the couch and carefully flipped open to the first page. Potions were fascinating, it turned out. So many small details could alter a potion's intended effects. Things like temperature of the water, the source where you got your ingredients from, hell, even moon water could have different effects depending on which hemisphere it was collected in. It was intricate, painfully so, but it all blended together to create so many amazing effects, and Wilbur found himself coming up with ideas for different ways you could possibly improve potions based on things like stirring direction or swapping out ingredients that were similar, but not exactly the same. So lost in the book, Wilbur didn't hear Tommy approaching the apartment until he was turning the keys into the lock. Nearly jumping out of his skin, Wilbur tossed the potion book onto the coffee table like it had burnt him, a strange sense of guilt flooding through him at being caught reading one of Tommy's books. The door squeaked as it opened, and Tommy strolled inside holding a plastic takeout bag of what smelled like Indian food. When his eyes flickered over to Wilbur on the couch, he raised an eyebrow. He said, nodding at Wilbur as he shut and locked the door behind him. Wilbur blinked. Hey. The two stared at each other for a beat. Then, Tommy walked over to the couch, setting the takeout down on the coffee table and raising his eyebrows when he noticed the potion book. You said I could read anything on the bookshelf, so... Yeah, man, I don't care. God knows I haven't even opened most of these things, so it's good they're getting some use. Tommy shrugged, leaving the takeout on the table as he turned to the kitchen. It didn't take you for a potion maker, but what the fuck? But what the fuck? Interrupting himself mid-sentence, Wilbur twisted around so he could see Tommy behind the couch, and noticed he was standing in the middle of the kitchen with a perplexed expression. Did you clean my kitchen? Tommy asked, eyebrows scrunched together as he stared at the empty sink. Wilbur shrugged. Is that a problem? Turning to face him, Tommy's frown deepened. It's not a problem, but why? You're horrible at keeping your apartment clean, Wilbur told him flatly. You had so much old food in that kitchen, it made me want to puke every time I walked over there. It didn't smell that bad, Tommy argued. Wilbur raised an eyebrow. I have enhanced senses. It smelled bad to me. Realization dawned on Tommy's face. God, And his shoulders slumped and looked back over to the kitchen again. Oh. Well, thanks, I guess? It's whatever, Wilbur muttered, twisting back around and curling into the corner of the couch. Behind him, Wilbur could hear the refrigerator door opening, followed by the hiss of a soda can being cracked open. Then, Tommy was coming back into the living room and plopped down on the couch right on the opposite of Wilbur. Wilbur waited for him to grab his food and go to his room or something. But instead, Tommy took his takeout container out of the bag, a puff of steam curling around his face as he opened the lid, revealing a heaping serving of chicken tikka masala on top of fluffy rice. Grabbing a plastic fork from the bag, Tommy took a bite of the food, and Wilbur realized he wasn't going to go anywhere for his meal. You know, I keep wanting to say sorry for not getting you anything, but it's not like you'd be able to eat it if I did, Tommy said as he swallowed his food. I appreciate the thought, Wilbur snorted. I've never had chicken tikka masala. Is it good? Then again, I've never had Indian food. Oh, my popcorn! A piece fell on the carpet. Yeah, it's delicious. I don't really think there's anywhere near where I live that has any Indian food. Wait, yogurt and it's chicken though. Or do you just mean like on the side? But you should try it will naan. What does that mean? Inside it. Sorry. I'm also just like a texture kind of person, so I don't know how much of that. Oh, with naan. I've heard of naan, but I've never had it. Where was I? Yeah, well, that's Tommy in it for you, thoughtful man, Tommy joked. Wait, look at the international section at the store. I don't even know if I have an international section at my store. Who knows? Tommy joked. He took another bite of the food, chewing on it for a moment with a crease between his brow. Then, once he swallowed this bite, he turned to look at Wilbur. I've always wondered, does food still, like, smell good to you? Like, does it make you hungry watching me eat this, or is it totally unappetizing? Well, that was a fair question now, wasn't it? It's not gross or anything, but it doesn't exactly smell good to me either, Wilbur began, biting the inside of his cheek as he tried to figure out how to explain it. I guess it's like when you smell flowers. They smell good, but not in the way you'd want to eat them, you know? Like, the smell of the spices and meat and all that is pretty good, but just from an objective standpoint and not, like, from a food standpoint. Humming, Tommy nodded. Do you ever miss human food? That's weirdly hard for me to answer, Wilbur said, tapping on his chin. Because I remember what food tastes like, and I remember that I enjoyed it, but it just doesn't taste good to me anymore. Like, when I think back to all the times I had chicken tikka masala, it's kind of like remembering a time you ate paper or something. Not bad, but not particularly good either. He paused for a beat. I do miss the ease of it, though. When I could stop being hungry just by buying a granola bar or something instead of having to go through the effort of hunting. It's like in the sauce and you put it over rice and you have it with naan or another type of bread that you cook it. Indian food is good. In general, it's spicy though. That's the thing. That's the kicker there. I am extremely white and I can't handle spice. But I'll try it. If I ever find an Indian food place, especially where I'm heading up for college in a couple months, I'll try it out. The yogurt takes care of the spice? Huh. I guess I just forgot for a moment that, like, plain yogurt exists. Because for some reason, the only thing I thought of in terms of yogurt was blueberry flavored yogurt. A really good mango smoothie that tastes great with tikka. Okay. Huh. Damn. Yeah, that actually must suck. Tommy acquiesced, scooping another forkful of chicken and rice into his mouth. I was hungry and didn't feel like cooking, so I just stopped at the restaurant down the street on my way back and got this in 10 minutes. We gotta go through a shit ton of effort to stop being hungry. Wait, you're gonna go through a shit ton of effort to stop being hungry. Wilbur almost said, and that's part of why I don't want to live like this. But he bit down the comment at the last second. Dude, where I work, they recently introduced smoothies, and while mango is one of the only things that is artificially flavored mango, like artificially flavored fruit flavoring, like apparently it's still good. Like, we have mango smoothies. Really? Yeah. I don't know if it's like a completely new thing that they added, but I've definitely never heard of them having like coolers and smoothies before. And I have lived here since before it was like built in our area. So mango's the best fruit? Nah, that goes to pineapple. But mango's a good fruit. Where was I? Speaking of feeding, Wilbur said instead, straightening up against the couch, did you find anything out about an ethical blood source for me yet? To his surprise, Tommy's face lit up at the question. Yeah, actually did. Putting his takeout container back onto the coffee table, Tommy pulled his legs up on the couch and sat cross-legged facing Wilbur. So the hunters have been investigating rumors of blood dealers for a while? We don't have a ton of leads on them, but from what I've heard, they're basically businesses that provide blood for vampires who either can't or don't want to hunt. Pineapple is so gross. I'm blocking you from my contact list. That's obviously a joke. It's only good with sticky rice / coconut sauce. Sticky rice is good. I don't know if I've ever had coconut sauce though. But yeah, I'm one of those people that that likes pineapple on pizza. Really says a lot about me, doesn't it? No, please don't. I'm so. Oh, you're talking about the contact list thing? Man, you're really stream delayed. Where was I? So, there's someone out there with a basement full of blood bags who just sells them to sad sacks like me? Wilbur questioned. Pretty much. I know we have a few leads in the city for possible blood dealers, but it's not something the hunters really have put a lot of time into investigating because we're already swamped with dealing with the normal vampires prowling around. How do you know these blood dealers get their blood from ethical sources, though? Wilbur asked, furrowing his brows. I can't eat cheese, but rice and pineapple is great. Fair enough. At this, Tommy's smile fell. Pineapple on pizza is a crime? You're a crime. Sorry. No. Well, we don't. We'll have to ask the blood dealer where they get the supply from if we can find one. I'm not drinking blood if it was just siphoned directly from some random person and put in a blood bag. Relax! I wouldn't want you to do that either, Tommy said, cutting him off. Again, we won't know anything until we find a blood dealer, so that's step one. How do you plan on finding one? Like I said, the hunters have been investigating, but no one's really following up on it because everyone's busy with other shit. I'm gonna look through some reports tomorrow to see if anything looks promising. If I find something, I'll let you know, Tommy explained, folding his arms over his chest. Great. More waiting. While the concept of blood dealers seemed promising, it wasn't like they had any solid leads on one existing yet. And even if they did manage to find a blood dealer, Wilbur still didn't want to let himself drink blood unless he knew the blood dealer had gotten it without hurting anyone. It was also frustrating how Tommy clearly had better things to do than look into leads on blood dealers for Wilbur, but he insisted on doing it anyway. This child was stupidly determined to help him, and Wilbur still couldn't figure out why. Yes, I'm a crime. How did you know? Tommy called it compassion, but Wilbur didn't want his compassion. Hell, he didn't deserve it. He had already hurt people for blood before. It was something that made his skin crawl to even think about. And whenever he glanced in the mirror and noticed his eyes swirling gold, all he could imagine was how he must have looked to the poor people he drank from in the past. He was a monster in the most literal sense. And even if they managed to find a blood dealer and the blood came from an ethical source, that wasn't going to change what Wilbur was. His friends thought he was dead, his parents were long gone, and once Tommy had gotten this kick of compassion out of his system, Wilbur would be right back on the streets where he started, for eternity. It hurt his head to think about how this was the rest of his existence. Even if it was harder to be okay with the idea of dying while sitting on a comfortable couch with a full stomach, when Wilbur remembered the potential centuries of this misery that sat ahead of him, he got pissed all over again that Tommy hadn't been able to do his only fucking job. Not pissed. That was the wrong word for it. Wilbur wasn't angry that Tommy didn't kill him. If anything, it made him want to cry. But he was already pathetic enough that he'd made a literal vampire hunter feel sorry for him, and Wilbur didn't want to make that even worse. So he forced the burning in his eyes down and grabbed a throw pillow off the couch to wrap his arms around. He ran his fingers over the surface of it, focusing on the small bumps in the fabric and how it lightly scratched against his skin in a soothing kind of pattern. There was movement across the couch, and when Wilbur glanced up, he saw that it was just Tommy tugging off his jacket and tossing it across the room, revealing that he was wearing a plain gray t-shirt underneath. And this was when Wilbur remembered he hadn't seen Tommy's bare arms till now. After seeing all the blood-stained clothes in the laundry hamper earlier, Wilbur had expected Tommy's arms to be littered with scars. While there were certainly a few raised ridges here and there weren't nearly as many scars as he thought there'd be. However, there were a lot more tattoos than Wilbur expected to see on a 17-year-old. Tommy's arms were covered with dark splotches of ink. Sigil tattoos littered his skin in varying sizes, all enchanted for different purposes that Wilbur couldn't even begin to guess. While Wilbur was well aware of sigil tattoos and how they worked, symbols drawn onto a person's skin imbued with magic that produced a certain effect when activated, they weren't something Wilbur ever really had personal experience with himself. Again, he'd always been interested in things like sigils and runes, but hadn't gotten the opportunity to learn much about them. One thing he did know, though, was that it was rare to find someone with more than 2 sigil tattoos. It was mainly because sigils could only be imbued with a few enchantments that were actually useful in everyday life, and they also weren't very strong. A minor healing sigil could take the pain away from a scrape or a stubbed toe, but it couldn't fix a broken bone. An enhancement sigil might make someone slightly better at seeing or hearing, but it wasn't a replacement for things like glasses or hearing aids. But Tommy had so many sigil tattoos, Wilbur struggled to even try and imagine what they all did. So distracted by the tattoos, Wilbur didn't realize Tommy was saying his name until he'd repeated it 3 times. "Wilbur, you good, man?" Snapping his head up, Wilbur winced when he realized Tommy had caught him staring. Shit. Sorry. I was just surprised by your tattoos." Blinking, Tommy glanced down at his arms in surprise, as if he'd forgotten the tattoos were there. "What? You've never seen sigil tattoos before?" "No, I have. I just haven't seen that many on one person before," Wilbur explained, narrowing his eyes to get a better look when Tommy held his arm out to Wilbur. "What do they all do, anyway?" "Well, I have a few for healing, one for speed, another to make my reflexes better, shit like that. But the majority of these are just standard protection sigils." Wilbur's eyes narrowed further. "You have multiple for the same purpose?" Tommy nodded. "Sure do. You know how sigils draw on the energy of both the person who wears it, but also the magic imbued in it from the designer?" Well, Wilbur suspected it was something like that, but he didn't actually know the specifics until Tommy told him. But considering how Tommy said it as if it was obvious, Wilbur just nodded anyway. There's a limit to how much the magic can put into a sigil. Wait. There's a limit to how much magic someone can put into a sigil when they design it, Tommy continued, pointing at one of the sigils close to his elbow. Like, it depends on how strong your emotions and why you want to make it that determines how much magic it's imbued with. But it's never going to be enough to be infinite or anything. So when a sigil runs out of magic from its creator, it can't keep functioning with just the same energy of the person it's on, so it just stops working entirely and becomes a normal tattoo. Wilbur frowned. So will sigil tattoos just stop working eventually? Well, it depends on how often you use it, Tommy explained, leaning back against the couch. For most people, protection sigils like the ones I have are usually good enough to last you almost a lifetime. But that's because most people aren't fighting vampires that want to kill them on a near daily basis. The fact that Tommy had so many sigil tattoos told Wilbur that he had multiple that had already run out of magic. And he was only 17. How the hell could he have gone through so many protection sigils so quickly? You're not even a full hunter yet and you've burned through that many sigils. Like I said, it's what happens when you fight in vampires on a daily basis, Tommy repeated, raising an eyebrow like he was confused at Wilbur's alarm. Besides, most of these aren't protection sigils. I've burnt through a healing one too, so I have 2 of those. And then I have ones I haven't gone through, like my enhancements for reflexes and stuff. He said it so casually, like it was completely normal to be 17 years old and to have already been in so many life or death situations. Wilbur wasn't sure which part made him feel sick more. The fact that Tommy had been hurt so many times, or the fact that he didn't even understand why that was a bad thing. Drink break 1 second. Can I ask you why you joined the Hunters? Wilbur asked after a few beats of silence. Like, you told me you joined them when you were 13. Why did you want to kill vampires as a 13-year-old? Wilbur knew he could be poking an angry bear with this question, but the more he learned about Tommy's time in the Hunters, the harder it was to ignore the why of it all. Why would Tommy do this to himself? To his surprise, Tommy didn't seem upset by the question at all. You know, a lot of the kids in my class had the whole tragic backstory type shit with their parents being killed by vampires, blah blah blah. And yeah, that sucks for them, sure. But that wasn't my deal, if that's what you were wondering, Tommy explained. Wilbur let out a quiet sigh of relief that he wasn't dredging up old trauma for Tommy. Basically, I was living on the street as a kid, because the orphanage I had grown up at was a shithole, so I left. One night, a feral vampire attacked me, but before I got my throat ripped open, a hunter showed up. Once the vampire was taken care of, the guy figured out pretty quickly I was homeless and offered to bring me to the academy so I could get tested for acceptance, since they could give me a place to sleep and food and all that. I think I have Nodders as a BTTV emo, but I'm not too sure. Do I? 1 second. Fairly certain I do. I do, okay. Great. So it was exactly what Wilbur had been worried about when he heard the hunters recruited children. They promised poor kids easy access to food and a warm bed, in exchange for them signing their lives away to fight the undead. Fucking hell, he should have gotten more involved in politics when he was still alive. That's a little fucked up, Wilbur muttered. Tommy frowned at that. What do you mean? Dragging his hands down his face, Wilbur groaned as he tried to figure out how to explain this in a way that Tommy would understand. Don't you think it's a little messed up that instead of just offering you normal help, the hunter you met immediately told you to sign your life to a life-threatening occupation to get your basic needs met? Oh, come on, it's not like that, Tommy huffed, folding his arms over his chest. I was told over and over again what the risks were. I was given a full briefing on the average hunter's life expectancy and shown examples of all the horrible ways hunters have died before I was allowed to sign the papers so I could join. What the fuck? They showed a 13-year-old pictures of maimed bodies? That's even worse. It was so dramatic. I knew what I was signing up for. It's not like I was actively starving to death. Yeah, I was hungry a lot, but I knew how to get food and could have stayed on the streets if I wanted. Besides, I don't regret joining. I like being able to protect people, so I think it makes it worth it, Tommy explained. Wilbur opened his mouth to argue that a child shouldn't be expected to protect anyone, but before he could speak, Tommy kept going. Anyway, what did you even do with your life before this was so fucking... Before this that was so fucking great? He asked, his frown deepening. Huh? You're judging me for joining the hunters, so I want to know what you did that was so much better than what I'm doing. Sighing, Wilbur pushed his hair back from his face. I wasn't judging you, he tried to argue. Tommy's frown didn't let up at that, and Wilbur sighed again as he dropped his hands back into his lap. If you must know, I was a musician. The anger drained from Tommy's face at this, softening into something more like surprise. Wait, really? Yeah, really. Not all that noble or whatever the hell, but I was trying to get noticed as a singer. I also gave guitar lessons to kids since busking for tips really doesn't net you that steady of an income. The corners of Tommy's lips quirked up in what could almost be considered a smile. You should sing for me. Furrowing his brows, Wilbur shook his head. I don't have my guitar anymore. You can sing without a guitar. I just want to hear if you're any good, Tommy said, his smile widening. While Tommy was right, Wilbur could certainly sing without a guitar. He hadn't actually sang since the day he was turned. Why is turned capitalized like that? It just felt like there was no point to it. When he was alive, he loved singing. Not just as a career goal, but because it gave him a way to express himself. To convey all the ugly, complicated thoughts in his mind through something that was beautiful. There was nothing beautiful to come from him now. The dead weren't meant to make art. Monsters couldn't create beauty. and the corpse had nothing to sing about. That was part of his human life, not something that was meant to cross over into this eternal torment of an afterlife. I don't sing anymore, he said quietly. He heard Tommy shift beside him. Why not? Wilbur Soot was the one who sang. I'm not him anymore, Wilbur admitted, staring at his hands. I'm just his shambling corpse left stumbling around. Tommy was quiet for a moment, and when he shifted again, his shoulders were pressed against Wilbur's. Wilbur, just because you're a vampire doesn't mean you're not still you, Tommy told him, his voice unusually soft. Sure, you're different, but it's not like you became a totally different person. Wilbur huffed. I'm the bad guy, Tommy. I'm the monster parents warn their children about to make them behave. I'm the thing that lurks in the shadows and makes people scared to walk alone at night. Wilbur Soot wasn't that, but I am. Fucking hell, you're not a monster, Will, Tommy insisted, nudging him with his elbow. You're a guy who got dealt a really bad hand, so now you have to live with it, and that's pretty fucking shitty. I get that. He paused, as if he was trying to figure out how to word the next thing he said. But I've seen plenty of monsters, and you're not one of them. That wasn't true. Tommy was wrong. Yes, Wilbur had shit luck, he agreed with that, but he knew he was. He wasn't one of the good guys of this story, and Tommy couldn't seem to get that through his head. You're wrong, Wilbur whispered, knowing that if he tried to speak any louder, his voice would crack. I'm not. For one thing, Tommy in it is never wrong, Tommy said, and Wilbur couldn't help but huff a bit at the weak joke. But even if I am wrong sometimes, I know I'm not wrong about this. And I'm gonna keep telling you that until you get it through your thick fucking skull. His eyes were burning again, and Wilbur rubbed at his face to try and make it go away. I don't understand you in the slightest. You have no reason to give a shit about me, and yet here you are, making me your problem for no goddamn reason. It's unbelievably frustrating. The couch squeaked as Tommy pushed to his feet. Well, a lot of people find me annoying at first. Glancing up from his lap, Wilbur saw Tommy had a cheesy grin spread across his face, like he was proud of that fact. I can see why, Wilbur muttered. Tommy gasped in fake offense. Oh, fuck you, you were supposed to say. Tommy, you're not annoying. You're so cool and badass, and I may be a monster, but I'm not a liar, Wilbur said, cutting him off. There was a sharp sting on his forehead as Tommy smacked him, making Wilbur yelp in surprise. Don't be a bitch, Tommy said, turning to his room. Anyway, I'm fucking beat, so I'm gonna sleep. But tomorrow I'll try to find more about blood dealers. Also, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but the door over there is the bathroom. Feel free to go take a shower if you want. You smell kind of awful. A shower? God, Wilbur couldn't remember the last time he'd had a shower. It sounded heavenly. Wilbur glanced at the half-eaten takeout food still sitting on the coffee table and frowned. Aren't you gonna put your food away? Pausing in his doorway, Tommy flashed a shit-eating grin at him. I mean, you already cleaned the kitchen today. I don't think putting away my food for me will be that much harder. You little... Wilbur was cut off when Tommy slammed the door behind him, a maniacal cackle echoing through the wall. That fucking gremlin, Wilbur muttered, glaring at the takeout container sitting in front of him. I'm not a goddamn maid. If he was smiling as he said that last part, well, no one would know except for him. liking this story. I'm always a sucker for really well written, like, found family stories, especially if they're crime boys. One second, I needed to stretch. Alright. I'm gonna pause the music because there's one thing I said I would do before ending stream. 1 second. I've never actually tried to do it in Wilbur's accent before. I've always done it in just like my regular singing voice, but wait. There we go. Oh, ew. Oh, that's way. Here for history, I would not call this history. Okay, I just need to remind myself of the... Wait. No. No. What is it? It's roughly the same chords as Life by the Sea, but it's like... 1 second. Nope. Nope. What is it? No. Hold on a second. I need to look up the chords. God damn it. Here we go. Oh, these are like the fucking stupid number ones. I can't read those. That doesn't sound right. No, that doesn't sound right. It's something different. Okay, what about the ukulele chords? Oh. There it is. Okay. Figured it out. Wait 1 second. There we go. I just hope I don't fuck up the strumming pattern. It's not like it's not the actual like it's not accurate, but it sounds cool. So. Wasting your time. You're wasting mine. I'd hate to see you leaving. A fate worse than dying. City gave me asthma. That's why I'm fucking leaving. And your water gave me cancer. And the pavement hurt my feelings. Shout at the wall. Walls don't fucking love you. Also, warning, the mic is gonna peak a little bit. Shout at the wall, 'cause the walls don't fucking love you. There's a reason London puts barriers on the tube line. There's a reason London puts barriers on the rails. There's a reason London puts barriers on the tube line. There's a reason London puts barriers on the rails. There's a reason London puts barriers on the tube line. There's a reason they fail. That felt so weird, but cool, I guess. Also, I'm not used to playing my guitar without a pick, so... Thanks. I hope I didn't completely kill your eardrums with my stupid shitty mic. Alright. Who shall we raid? Oh, I know. But first, let me bring this up. Raid. Yep, I think I put it in right. I'm so happy watching it. Oh, thank you. I remember the first time the Waterslide Boys raided me, it was with 13 viewers, and all of them left. 30 seconds later. So I was expecting I was expecting everybody to just leave. New comfort streamer? God, I can't get emotional. No! Alright, thank you guys so much for watching. If you type in ! Socials, that brings you to all my other socials. Join my Discord server if you want. I gotta bring some life to that. Thanks. I've not really had much motivation to stream the past few days, so, or the past week even, because mostly because not really anybody watches it or has the time to. So I really appreciate you guys sticking around. I don't know when I'll stream next. I'll stream Monday. Continue reading a couple more chapters of this. So, you're great, and please keep being awesome. Thanks. Alright. I'll see you guys on Monday. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.